The alley smelled of rain and regret. A damp, electric tension hanging in the air as I sprinted through the shadows of Brooklyn's warehouse district. My sneakers slapped against the wet pavement, heart pounding louder than the distant hum of the city. I wasn't running from danger but from the truth I'd just seen in Levi's eyes. It was supposed to be a simple night. A dive bar. A few drinks. Maybe some laughter to drown out the ache I'd carried since moving to New York 3 months ago. I was 24, black, and still figuring out how to carve a space for myself in this chaotic city. Working as a graphic designer by day and chasing dreams of something bigger by night. My name's Caleb Brooks, and I'd always been good at keeping my feelings locked up tight until Levi Martinez crashed into my life like a meteor, burning through every defense I'd built. That night, I'd seen him at the bar, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he laughed with some guy I didn't know. Levi was 25, Hispanic, with a smile that could stop traffic and a way of moving that made you want to follow him anywhere. We'd been friends for weeks, orbiting each other in this unspoken dance of glances and half-spoken truths. But seeing him lean close to that stranger, their shoulders brushing, sparked something in me I couldn't name: jealousy, longing, or maybe both. I'd bolted from the bar, needing air, needing distance, needing to outrun the way my chest tightened at the thought of him with someone else. Now, in the alley, I slowed to a stop, breath ragged, leaning against a graffiti-covered wall. The city pulsed around me, alive with possibility and danger. I closed my eyes, trying to shake the image of Levi's hand on that guy's arm. Why did it matter so much? We were just friends. Friends who stayed up late talking about everything from our favorite indie bands to the weight of our pasts. Friends who sometimes sat too close, whose silences felt heavier than words. Caleb. His voice cut through the night, sharp and desperate. I turned, and there he was, jogging toward me, his leather jacket glistening with rain. Levi's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it again, that fire, that unspoken thing that had been building between us. He didn't stop until he was inches away, his breath visible in the cool air. "What the hell, man?" he said, voice low, almost a growl. "You just take off like that." I opened my mouth to lie, to say I was fine, but the words caught in my throat. Levi stepped closer, and before I could move, he pinned me against the wall, his hands braced on either side of my shoulders. The brick was cold against my back, but his gaze was molten, searing through me. "If you're gonna kiss a guy," he said, voice rough, "it better be me instead." Time stopped. My pulse roared in my ears, and for a moment, the world was just us two guys in a rain-soaked alley, teetering on the edge of something irreversible. I wanted to laugh it off, to push him away, but my body betrayed me, leaning into the space between us. "Levi," I started, but he shook his head, his eyes searching mine like he was looking for permission, for truth. "Don't," he said. "Don't say anything unless it's real." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as they hovered near his chest. Real. That word felt like a challenge, a dare to admit what I'd been running from since the day we met. I'd grown up in a small town in Georgia, where being openly gay wasn't just hard, it was dangerous. I'd learned to hide, to blend in, to keep my heart on lockdown. But Levi, he was fearless, unapologetic, and he made me want to be brave. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I don't want you with anyone else." His lips curved into a half-smile, and for the first time that night, I saw relief in his eyes. "Good," he said, leaning closer, "because I've been waiting for you to catch up." The next morning, I woke up in my tiny Bushwick apartment, the memory of Levi's words still burning in my mind. We hadn't kissed not yet, but the weight of his confession, of mine, hung between us like a promise. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the way his voice had softened when he said he'd been waiting. Waiting for me. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. I met Levi at a coffee shop in Williamsburg later that day. The kind of place with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. He was already there, sitting by the window, sketching something in his notebook. Levi was an artist, always carrying a sketch pad filled with bold, vibrant drawings that somehow captured the chaos of the city and the quiet of his own thoughts. I slid into the seat across from him, my heart doing that stupid flip it always did when he looked up and smiled. "You okay?" he asked, closing his sketch pad. His voice was gentler now, but there was still an edge to it, like he was waiting for me to run again. "Yeah," I said, stirring my coffee to avoid his gaze. "Just processing." He laughed, a low, warm sound that made my chest ache. "You're not the only one." We talked for hours, the conversation weaving between light and heavy, from our favorite movies to the fears we rarely spoke aloud. Levi told me about growing up in the Bronx, about the way his family had struggled to accept him when he came out at 17. "They love me," he said, staring out the window, "but it's like they don't know how to love all of me." I nodded, understanding too well. My parents were supportive in their own way, but there was always a distance, a hesitation in their voices when we talked about my life. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living two lives," I said, "the one I show them, and the one I want to live." Levi reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "You don't have to hide with me, Caleb." Those words hit harder than I expected, cracking open something I'd kept buried for years. I wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and I wasn't sure I was ready to give it fully. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, Levi and I fell into a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and dangerous. We'd meet up after work, wandering the city together, grabbing tacos in the East Village, catching live music in Greenpoint, or just sitting on a park bench watching the world go by. Every moment with him felt like a step toward something bigger, something real, but there was always a shadow hanging over us. My fear, his impatience, the unspoken question of what we were to each other. One night, we ended up at a rooftop party in Dumbo, the kind of place where artists and dreamers gathered to drink cheap wine and pretend they had it all figured out. The skyline glittered across the river, and Levi looked like he belonged there, his laughter bright against the night. I watched him from a distance, my heart swelling and sinking at the same time. He was magnetic, drawing people in without even trying, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't enough to keep him. "Hey," he said, appearing at my side with 2 plastic cups of wine. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Overthinking." He nudged my shoulder, his eyes softening. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You know." I took a sip of the wine, the bitterness grounding me. What if I messed this up? Levi? What if I'm not enough? He set his cup down, turning to face me fully. "Caleb, I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for you." His words were a lifeline, but they also scared me. I wasn't used to being seen. Not like this. Not in a way that made me feel like I could be everything I was afraid to be. As the weeks passed, the pull between us grew stronger, but so did the complications. Levi was bold, unafraid to wear his heart on his sleeve, while I was still learning how to let mine breathe. We hadn't labeled what we were, friends. Something more. Something undefined, but every touch, every glance, felt like a step toward a truth I wasn't sure I could handle. One evening, we found ourselves at a small gallery in Chelsea where Levi's art was being showcased. His paintings lined the walls, vivid bursts of color that told stories of struggle and hope. I watched him move through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing, his confidence lighting up the room. But when his eyes found mine, it was like the rest of the world faded away. "You're proud of me, aren't you?" he teased later, as we stood outside the gallery, the autumn air crisp against our skin. "Hell yeah," I said, grinning. "You're kind of a big deal." He laughed, but there was something serious in his eyes. You're the only one I wanted to impress tonight. My heart stuttered, and before I could respond, he took my hand, pulling me toward a quiet side street. The city was alive around ushinking cars. Distant laughter, but in that moment, it was just us. He stopped under a street lamp, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Caleb," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I'm done waiting for you to make the first move." Before I could process his words, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was both gentle and electric. It was like the world shifted, like every fear I'd ever had melted away in the warmth of his touch. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face. And for the first time, I didn't care who saw us. But the moment was shattered by a sharp voice behind us. "Levi?" We pulled apart, and I turned to see a woman standing there, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of shock and anger. She was in her late 20s, with sharp features and a leather jacket that matched Levi's. "Who's this?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at me. Levi's jaw tightened. "Jada, this is Caleb. Caleb, Jadami X." The word hit like a punch. X. I hadn't even known Levi had an ex, let alone one who looked at him like she still had a claim. Jada's gaze flicked between us, and I could feel the weight of her judgment, her curiosity, her hurt. "Nice to meet you," I said, forcing a smile, but my voice sounded hollow. Jada didn't respond. She looked at Levi, her expression softening. "Can we talk? Alone?" Levi hesitated, his hand still holding mine. "Jada, now's not a good time." "It's never a good time with you," she snapped, then turned and walked away, her boots echoing on the pavement. I pulled my hand from Levi's, the warmth of the kiss replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. "You didn't tell me about her," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Levi ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into his face. "It's not what you think. Jada and I broke up a year ago. She's complicated." "Complicated how?" I pressed, hating how small I felt. He sighed, looking away. "She was my first love, Caleb. But it's over. I swear." I wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in, sharp and relentless. I'd spent so long guarding my heart, and now, with one kiss, I'd let myself be vulnerable. What if I'd made a mistake? The next few days were a blur of tension and unspoken questions. Levi called, texted, even showed up at my apartment with coffee and an apology. But I kept my distance, needing space to sort through the mess in my head. Jada's sudden appearance had shaken me, not just because of what she represented, but because she reminded me of how little I knew about Levi's past. How could I trust him when I was still learning to trust myself? One night, I found myself at a queer community center in Harlem, a place I'd started volunteering at to feel connected to something bigger. The center was hosting an open mic night, and I watched as people shared their stories, some funny, some heartbreaking, all raw. A trans woman named Marissa, in her 30s, took the stage and spoke about finding love after years of feeling unworthy. Her words hit me hard, stirring something I'd been trying to ignore. "You don't have to be perfect to be loved," she said, her voice steady. "You just have to be brave enough to let someone see you." I left the center that night with her words echoing in my head, walking the streets of Harlem until I ended up at Levi's apartment in the Bronx. I hadn't planned to go there, but my feet carried me to his doorstep, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. When he opened the door, his eyes widened in surprise. "Caleb, what's wrong?" "I don't want to run anymore," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I'm scared, Levi. Scared of screwing this up. Scared of not being enough. But I'm here. I'm trying." He stepped forward, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. "You're more than enough," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You always have been." Levi's apartment was a reflection of him, chaotic, colorful, alive. Canvases lined the walls. Half-finished sketches scattered across a rickety table. We sat on his couch, the space between us small but charged, and talked until the early hours of the morning. He told me about Jada, how they'd been high school sweethearts, how their breakup had been messy but necessary. She wanted me to be someone I'm not, he said, his voice low. But with you, I can just be me. I wanted to believe him, but trust was still a tightrope I was learning to walk. What happens when you realize I'm not what you want either? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Levi turned to me, his eyes fierce. Caleb, I've known what I wanted since the day we met. You're the one who keeps doubting it. His words were a challenge, one I wasn't sure I could meet. But as I looked at him, at the way his hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, I saw the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. He was just as scared as I was, just as human. We kissed again that night, slower this time, like we were learning each other all over again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time, I let myself believe that might be enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of moments, some small, some monumental. We went to a drag show in the West Village, laughing until our sides hurt. We spent a rainy afternoon in a bookstore, reading passages to each other from books we'd never heard of. And one night, under the stars in Prospect Park, Levi took my hand and said, I'm falling for you, Caleb. Hard. I froze, the weight of his words settling over me. Falling. It was a word that felt too big, too final. But as I looked at him, his face lit by the soft glow of the park's lights, I realized I was falling too. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice shaking. But I'm falling for you too. He grinned, pulling me close. And for a moment, the world felt right. But the world has a way of complicating things. And our bubble of happiness couldn't last forever. It started with a phone call. I was at work, designing a logo for a client, when Levi's name flashed on my screen. His voice was tense. Urgent. Caleb, I need you to meet me at the hospital. It's my brother. I dropped everything, catching a cab to Bellevue Hospital where Levi was waiting in the lobby, his face pale. His younger brother, Mateo, had been in a car accident, a hit and run that left him with a broken leg and a concussion. Levi was a wreck, pacing the sterile hallways, blaming himself for not being there. He's only 19, Levi said, his voice breaking. He's got his whole life ahead of him. And now, I took his hand, squeezing it tight. He's gonna be okay. Levi, you're here now. That's what matters. We spent hours at the hospital, waiting for updates, holding each other through the fear. When Mateo finally woke up, groggy but alive, Levi's relief was palpable. I stayed with him, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I was starting to understand what it meant to show up for someone, no matter what. Mateo's accident brought Levi and me closer, but it also exposed the cracks in our foundation. Levi threw himself into helping his brother recover, spending every spare moment at the hospital or running errands for his family. I tried to be there for him, but the distance between us grew, not in miles, but in the things we didn't say. One night, I found him at his apartment, surrounded by crumpled sketches and empty coffee cups. You okay? I asked, sitting beside him on the floor. He shook his head, his eyes red from exhaustion. I'm trying, Caleb, but it's like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to ask for help. Then let me help, I said, reaching for his hand. You don't have to do this alone. He looked at me, his expression raw. What if I'm not enough for you? For Mateo? For anyone? It was the first time I'd seen him so vulnerable, and it broke something in me. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. You're enough, Levi. More than enough. We stayed like that for a long time, the weight of his fears mingling with mine. I realized then that love wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. As Mateo recovered, Levi and I found our rhythm again. But the city had other plans. One night, we were walking through Times Square, the lights dazzling and overwhelming, when we ran into Jada again. She was with a group of friends, her laughter cutting through the noise of the crowd. "Levi," she called, her voice sharp. "Didn't expect to see you here." Levi tensed beside me, his hand tightening around mine. "Jada, let's not do this." She stepped closer, ignoring me. "You're different now. What happened to the guy who used to fight for what he wanted?" "I'm still that guy," Levi said, his voice steady. "But what I want is standing right next to me." Her eyes flicked to me, and for a moment, I saw something like respect in her gaze. "Take care of him," she said, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Levi let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. "I'm sorry," he said, turning to me. "I didn't want you to deal with that." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of her shadow. I wasn't afraid of us. Spring came to New York, and with it, a sense of renewal. Levi's art was gaining traction, with galleries across the city showing interest. I landed a big project at work, designing a campaign for a local nonprofit. But more than that, we were building something together, a life, a future, one messy, beautiful moment at a time. One evening, we found ourselves back in that park where we'd first admitted our feelings. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, petals drifting like confetti. Levi pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me as we stood under the same tree from months ago. "Do you remember that night in the alley?" he asked, his voice soft. "How could I forget?" I said, smiling. "You pinned me against a wall and changed everything." He laughed, his breath warm against my cheek. "I'd do it again. You know, every single time." I looked at him, at the way his eyes held mine, and I realized something. Love wasn't just about the big moments, the kisses, the confessions, the fights. It was about the quiet ones, too. The way he left me coffee on tough mornings. The way I stayed up late to help him finish a painting. The way we chose each other, over and over, even when it wasn't easy. "I love you," I said, the words spilling out before I could overthink them. Levi's smile was brighter than the city lights. "I love you too, Caleb." We kissed under the cherry blossoms, the world soft and alive around us. It wasn't a perfect ending, life never is. But it was ours, and that was enough. As we walked hand in hand through the park, I thought about the journey we'd taken to get here. The fear, the doubt, the moments of courage that had brought us closer. Love, I realized, wasn't about being fearless. It was about being brave enough to try, to trust, to let someone pin you against a wall and show you who you could be. And as the city hummed around us, I knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, we'd face it together.